I am very excited to introduce to you Mr. Curtis Ray Davis.
Good morning, Creative Mornings family. Transit is my theme word today. I think about it as movement across space and time. I think about it as transition. I think about it as transformation. I think about it a lot. Even before I had the opportunity to come on Creative Mornings, we've always been in transit. But today I want to talk about transit as it pertains to our race. And when I talk about our race, I mean the human race. We've been categorized, separated, and transformed into categories of different people, different types of human beings, when genetically we're probably just one group. But this transit, how did it actually take place? We'll start in a cable line. A cable line transferred into a place called Africa. Africa came from a man in Rome who conquered a people that became a people always in transit, a race always in transit. They were transferred from the African mainland to the Caribbean to be transformed in a few months' time from men and women with dignity to creatures, beasts of burden, to be sold in transit throughout the entire world. How did it happen? Why did it happen? Well, I went to Angola prison, as you heard in the introduction of what I was that I was charged with a second-degree murder that I didn't commit. Riding around in my transportation in Compton, California, when all of a sudden I was stopped, arrested, and introduced to the idea of becoming a prisoner in transit. I'm moving from bus to bus, jail to jail throughout the Los Angeles County prison or correctional system until finally I was extradited, transported on Delta Airlines from California to the state of Louisiana, where it seemed that I had went back in time, maybe 100, 150 years. I woke up and I said, wow, slavery is real. They transferred me from that college-educated guy, that veteran, that military guy, to the guy that they said was a slave now. And you might say, well, why do you say you were a slave? Well, according to the Constitution, the 13th Amendment, slavery was abolished except for the convicted felon or the person duly convicted of a crime. Once I got to Angola, I wanted to better understand my circumstance, my situation. How had I been transformed from this man to now this thing, this number, this nobody? So I started to study. I started to transform myself again. I started to try to develop. I started to try and attempt and work to outgrow my circumstance. So I said, wow, why do they call a place in Louisiana Angola, named after a country in South Africa? I learned that this place was the place that they used on the Mississippi River to bring slaves from the Caribbean and breed them to be sold on auction blocks in places like New Orleans. And I said, wow. And as I started to learn more and more about the circumstances and the history of Angola and the state that I was from, or the state that I found myself in, I started to find out that this is a problem for the whole world because it affected the whole world. Louisiana is a beautiful place. It's a gumbo of all ethnicities and diverse cultures. However, at the same time, it's responsible for major wrongs that have been committed in the name of profit, greed, jealousy maybe sometimes. But we're seeking now to transform this situation into a situation that's more balanced. People call it justice. So as I continue to work in Angola, I realized that if we can convince people that slavery is still real, and if it was bad 150 years ago, then it should be bad now, right? No, not necessarily. That is the hard conversation to have to transform or go across the situation that a person has in their mind when they're stuck and said, hey, it is what it is. The world can't be changed. Nobody can. I didn't make it that way. I found it this way. How do you get from this point to changing that person to say, wait, we need to abolish slavery, period. We need to take away the exploitation of other human beings. And it's all about movement. And when we start to think about how do you move this, if they say that work has an equation, it's force, time, distance. So if you're working and you're not moving anything, if I push something and it goes across the room, that means that I worked based on the distance that that thing has traveled, that transit, right? At the same time, if we're just the hamster on the wheel, all the movement in the world doesn't mean that you're going across anywhere. You're still moving, staying in the same place. So transit, transportation, transference, transition are all the root of the same thing. It's about movement across space and time, not just movement in circles or on the wheel. I wanted to really talk about the epithets, the race that I belong to, that I've been assigned to, because we all know that race is a political construct. But at the same time, my group has been in transition since slavery. We were niggas, we transformed into Negroes, we transformed again into colored people, we transformed again into Black Americans, and now we're in the state of being African Americans, a race always in transition. How do we find our common solid ground? How do we change the condition that we're in right now? I think, though, it's first by acknowledging that we have a problem. You know, it's like the 12 steps. You gotta first say, hey, man, this is a problem. Racism does exist in the United States of America. I don't know, I heard the Trump administration a couple of weeks ago talking about that they didn't really believe that patriarchal white supremacy was a problem anymore in the 21st century or in 2020. It's almost like we haven't, or the transference mentally hasn't even taken place. So we continue to work. When I got out of prison in 2016, the first thing that I wanted to do was, of course, try to get a driver's license or have a bath, or meet a girl, walk down the street, hold hands. But the first real thing that I wanted to do was make change in the Louisiana criminal justice system. As I went around talking to people about what needed to be changed, the first thing that we wanted to attack was the fact that Louisiana leads the entire world in the per capita incarceration of its citizens. We can change that. If we can transform that into making this stop being the slave state that it is and start to think about the development of human beings and treating crime as a social disease, that's a major transference of thought that would take place. So we got with the governor, John Bel Edwards, and put together a set of bills called the Justice Reinvestment Act. The idea was to take the dollars that were going into the criminal justice system, take the dollars that were going into corrections, and cause a transit, a movement of that money back into hospitals and education. This is not as easy as it sounds. People seem to have wanted to keep the traditions alive, to stay the hamster on the wheel, to let's conserve what we have right now. Let's not change anything. And it was mind-boggling to me. Why not be progressive? Why not go forward? Why can't we cross the chasm that separates us, even though I know we're the same thing? I met Aryan Nation leaders, white skinhead neo-Nazi members in Angola that hated me and that I hated on first look. And I understood later that this is prejudice. This is not necessarily racism that we're dealing with right now, because in order to be a racist, you gotta have access to a power apparatus. As we started to understand the power apparatus and live around each other, something started to happen. We started to gain mutual respect for one another. And it was like, if I can be friends with the leader of the neo-Nazi skinhead party, then I know that I come home, and we're in that close confine. I come home, we can create a synthesis that would help bridge that gap between these two understandings and not necessarily have to even cross it. So transit is good at one point, but how about we just reach out to each other and make it one thing? So it's not just, it becomes now the transference of that energy, not just the transit and going across space and time, but now reaching out to each other and meeting in the middle somewhere, right? So the idea of transit just was so deep to me when Jim Dempsey brought it. He said, man, this is, I said, I wrote a book. We've worked to change the system. I continuously, this is my thing. This is what I do. Why do you think that I even deserve to be on a Creative Morning show? And I was humbled. I was like, wow, you're picking me? It's like a TED Talk almost. And he said, Curtis, you guys are doing good work. And I believe that people deserve to hear about the work that you're doing. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how we got to where we are, the racism, that transatlantic slave trade, there's that transit word again, the movement of people from one condition to another, and help people to realize if you can demonize a group or if you can destroy a group, guess what? In the opposite direction, you can rebuild, you can reteach, you can develop that group again. So our work at the Reentry Mediation Institute is all about helping that transfer. When the guy is in prison and we have these ridiculous recidivism rates where it's something like 60% of the people who go to prison are expected to return to prison after they come home within a 3-year period of time. We can't just blame that on, oh, well, that's the way things are. No, we have to make the transition in our mind that we have the science, we have enough technology, we have enough know-how to fix the situation. We are starting to treat crime as a social disease now. So we go into the prison, we train mediators who are formerly incarcerated to do conflict resolution between the person that's in prison and the family that person is returning home to. This is now the missing piece of reentry. This is the missing piece of crime prevention in the United States of America, to help them now understand that the community is here for you, your family is here for you, and we're gonna wrap services around you to make sure that you succeed. Now that's a major transition. They say in basketball, and I don't know how many of you guys are basketball fans, that the most exciting things in the game happen during transition. Transition is when somebody's going up one way and somebody steals the ball and they head back the other way, and you might see LeBron James do the 360 slam dunk or whatever. But mistakes also happen in transition. Transition is always a dangerous time. So I know from personal experience, a person that goes down the rabbit hole and has his proverbial Alice in Wonderland experience inside the criminal justice system or inside of prison or plantations or correctional facilities all over the world is now traumatized. This person is, imagine losing your freedom. Go lock yourself in your bathroom for about 30 minutes and see what it feels like to not have the ability to move through space and time, to not be able to go in the kitchen to cook yourself something or have to wait to somebody to bring you a glass of water. That is traumatizing. So I have to identify or help people realize that even though this person done a crime, he offended society, that person is also sick. And if we want to fix our society, we have to take away the vengeance aspect of justice and lean more to the mercy aspect of justice that's missing in our criminal justice system. That's a major transition as well. We work every day, mostly with words, trying to convince people that this is where resources should actually be allocated, instead of just spending $33,000 a year to keep a person incarcerated for having 2 joints of marijuana. And we only spend $6,000 a year to educate a child. This transfer has to take place. Something different has to happen, right? So as we continue to deal with our work in reentry in the state of Louisiana, and as we continue to work to convince people that we can change our system, we can have a society that doesn't have to look like the one that we have right now. We have to remember that it's a movement, though, and we must keep it moving. This time, I'm not sure how I'm supposed to really explain it, even though this is something that's near and dear to my heart. But transition and reentry and criminal justice reform are the keys to what we're talking about in reentry. I want people to visit our website at reentrymediation.org. Find out what it is that we do. If you could, get involved, adopt a prisoner, help us train mediators, help us to change the world. Come and talk to me. I'm accessible. Get with us on Instagram. Get with us on Facebook, because this is a work in process. We continue to push and push and push. So every day is another way that you can help change the world while I continue to be boots on the ground. I wish that they had a system like this 5 years ago when I returned home from 25 years of incarceration. Before I went to prison, they didn't even have the internet. There was no World Wide Web. In 1990, I think Tim Lerner developed the internet in 1991, or the World Wide Web in 1991. It was just mind-boggling to see how this extremely technologically advanced society had gone through so many transformations during my time in prison. I learned about something called Moore's Law. Moore's Law says that a computer chip changes or gets smaller every 18 months. That's why your phone keeps changing, or that's why your TV keeps getting flatter. That means that all the technology that you have right now will change in 18 months and become obsolete. So what do you think is happening in the mind of the person that's trapped like Rip Van Winkle and goes into the Catskill Mountains, falls asleep for 15 years, and comes back to find that the total world has changed? It's transformed into something that he or she can't understand. Who's to help bridge that gap? Who's to help understand the needs of that person, the psychological needs of that person? The fact that I came home, I couldn't even use a credit card. I couldn't pump gas. I'm out there and I got the gas thing. When I went in, you could just pump the gas and push the button and it'll work. And so I got the card and I put the card in there and I squeezed the gas thing and I'm like, it's not working, okay? Put the thing back on, take the card back out. I'm looking at it, trying to figure out, okay, you got a TV screen on there, they got commercials, and what the commercial doing at the gas pump in the first place? So I was like, okay, now try it again, push the thing in there, squeeze, no gas comes out. So I stopped for a second, try to breathe, because my anxiety is starting to bother me at that point. I'm like, why can't I pump gas? So I asked the elderly lady that was at the other gas pump, excuse me, ma'am. And you could tell she kind of got nervous. After all, I'm an African-American male in a hoodie. And she said, what do you want? I said, I'm sorry, ma'am. I've been incarcerated for almost a quarter of a century and I can't figure out how to make the gas come out of the thing. And she said, oh, baby. I felt warmth. I felt that she cared. And she said, look, take the card and you push it in and pull it out fast. And then it'll acknowledge whether or not you need a PIN or whether or not you need a zip code. And I'm like, okay, all right, let me do this. I can do this, right? So and it sounds crazy. I know that it sounds crazy. So I push it in and pull it out, and by golly, it worked. And it's little bitty things like that. Every day there's a learning curve that's taking place for that person in transition, that person that's coming home from the traumatic experience of being dehumanized. Because that's a part of the punishment, right? We want to make sure that you rot somewhere, that you experience pain. That's what the criminal justice system is about, the purposeful infliction of pain. Okay, might as well kill them then. because that person is going to return back to society. What kind of neighbor do you want? Do you want a neighbor traumatized by that constant level of pain, or do you want a neighbor that's been treated for whatever ails him or her, return to the society where that person can now contribute, make major changes, help your systems, help your governments, because we are able to do some amazing things after the transformation if you do the transformation correctly. I read over 4,200 books while I was in prison. Now, just because you read a book doesn't mean that you comprehend what you read, and I get that. But I never even read about a person that read more than me. Not being arrogant and conceited, it gives you a time for introspection. It gives you a chance to find out who you really are. I was 27 years old before I even met myself. Picture that. 27. I went in prison at 21. I was 27 years old before I identified my true self, the person inside of the flesh that you see. So we see the African-American bald head male in the hoodie, but that's not really me. I've transformed from a zygote to an embryo to an infant to a toddler to a little boy to a pre-adolescent teen to a young man to this middle-aged 51-year-old thing that you're looking at, the clay, the flesh thing that you're looking at. But this is not me. That is a life in transit. All of this is transit. We're always transforming, but the thing inside me is me. I'm the same thing that each and every one of you are. The thing inside, if you can look past the melanin or lack of melanin or whatever the skin thing is that's causing us to use the criminal justice system or our law enforcement apparatus as a weapon. Across the whole United States, the legal system has been weaponized and pointed towards communities of color, where people have to be kept in their place and policed by the same apparatus that transformed from the slave catchers to the local sheriffs to the now military police departments that you're seeing all across America with all of this Iraqi, Afghanistan war material that they're subsidized with. When they talk about defunding the police departments, people are like, oh, you can't take away the police departments. We're not talking about taking away the police departments, but they don't need Hellcat missiles. What is that for? What are these armored personnel carriers for? What is all this this military grade? Who are we fighting? Who are you about to destroy? What cities are going to be occupied that your law enforcement apparatus needs to be like that? So that's a major transformation that's taken place over the years, the special weapons and tactics. Of course, yeah, we need police. We need a society that's based on laws and regulations. But why can't we change a little bit and transform that into, let's say, a police department that used tranquilizer guns? I was watching National Geographic the other day, and I seen them take down a bull elephant with a tranquilizer gun. That means they didn't want to kill it. They wanted to put it on a reserve. So why do you have to kill black men every 28 hours when we could just use some type of incapacitation weapon? That's an idea, but it takes a whole lot of transition and mental transit in order to accept from the powers that be, because the powers that be are mostly both liberal and conservative, mostly want to conserve. Let's stay exactly where we're at. We love the status quo. Now, to speak about change is one thing, but to actually change something is a precarious situation. We're always attacking the person that wants to take us from where we are to anywhere else, because where we are seems safe no matter how dangerous that place is. I've enjoyed you this morning, Creative Mornings. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share with you. I hope that I've given you something that might benefit you. If I've said anything that offends anybody, charge it to my head and not my heart. Know that we are just trying to make a better world happen. Remember, this is the Reentry Mediation Institute of Louisiana. We need your help. If you guys can reach out to us in any kind of way before Giving Tuesday and you want to do something with your taxes or give it to something that's actually going to change your community. So again, I say I love you and peace.